Yours, my friend. Absolutely yours.
I don't smell that, so I think I feel okay.
But anyhow, that's
Going. Yep. Yep. Very short. Quite interesting. So, yep. Okay. Thank you. No, I didn't get it. It wasn't. Yeah. I thought he's been covering something that right. Yeah. I was good. It was good. They took 2 out of 3. I was out of 4 game. We went to the series. All that. Yeah. Yeah. We went Friday morning. About Sunday night.
I bought it.
Yeah. Poking the bear, set the boat on. Oh yeah. 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 Took picture of every dish in the front of it. You would have loved it. You would have loved it. Look at this view, right? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. Got it. Voice trip. You got it. Right in for people. Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, right up here will be good. Thank you. Good morning. I guess you want me to just kind of get rolling. It's 10:30.
I think so. I think so. I've been trying to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was standing there talking away and didn't realize what time it was.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. Let's see if I can get this. Everybody can hear me. Is that a little bit better? Okay, great. So good morning. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your really busy day to pay tribute today with all of us. Pay tribute to all who lost their lives on 9/11 and to honor all of our first responders and military service members that have sacrificed so much ever since that day. If you would, please rise for the presentation of colors by VVA Chapter 20 and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, as well as the national anthem sung by Kirsten Whaley, who happens to be a U.S. Army veteran. And then we'll have the invocation delivered by Tom Puff, also from VVA Chapter 20.
Ready? Halt! Left, face.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ready? Two. Freeze that. Hark!
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets roared glad, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Two.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out and sharing this day with our heroes. Please bow your heads and hearts with me as we ask God's blessing on this day. Gentlemen, please uncover. Ladies, as you wish. Heavenly Father, we thank you for a beautiful day to remember our loved ones. Thank you for the freedoms that we enjoy in America. We recognize that those liberties come from your grace and mercy toward us. We also want to acknowledge those who defend our freedom on a daily basis. We recall the events that horrified us 23 years ago today, but we also remember those lost in the many attacks since then, both here and abroad. We remember our brothers and sisters, sons and daughters in our military, police, firefighters, EMTs, chaplains, and civilian personnel who did their duty and paid the ultimate price to protect us all. We thank you, Lord, for the blessing that you've poured out upon this nation. We thank you again for the heroes who defend her and us against all threats to our security. May our children never have to fight the battles that we have fought and continue to fight, so that they and their offspring may know the blessings that come from the peace we've attained. Thank you for organizations like the VOC, the VSA, and the VA system who care for the needs of our veterans. Thank you for the Tunnels to Towers Wounded Warrior Project that cares for the needs of families of first responders. Excuse me. And finally, we ask you to bless the service and be with the families who have lost loved ones on and since 9/11. Veterans, first responders, civilians were all lost to terrorist acts, and we ask that you defend us and let those families know that they are not alone, that you will be with them to be their companion, parent, family, and friend. Comfort them and keep them in your perfect peace. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Honor guard, prepare to post. Ready? Post. Present. Harvest. Ready? Two. Return to ranks. Right. Face. Forward. Heart.
Well, thank you, Kirsten, Tom, and members of the Honor Guard. You all may be seated. So we, as usual, have a wonderful group of elected officials with us today, community partners, and of course, all of you as well. And so I just wanted to welcome our elected officials. If I miss anybody, I apologize. I always try to get as many as I see that have come in, but wanted to say thank you for coming today to John Polito on behalf of Congressman Morelli, Jeremy Cooney, New York State Senator, District 56, Summer Brook, New York State Senator, District 55, Jen Lunsford, New York State Assembly District 135, Josh Jensen, New York State Assembly District 134, Sarah Clark, New York State Assembly District 136, Brian Mankdalo, New York State Assembly District 130, Kate Munsinger on behalf of Pamela Helming, New York State Senator, District 54, Alan Richards on behalf of Harry Bronson, New York State Assembly District 138, Adam Bello, our county executive, Michael Burns with the City of Rochester on behalf of Mayor Malik Evans, Todd Baxter, Monroe County Sheriff, Nick Stefanovic, Director of the Monroe County Veterans Service Agency, and a very impressive lineup from the Monroe County Legislature. Oh dear. Let's see here. Okay. I thought I missed that page. Blake Keller, John Baines, Tracy DeFlorio, Paul Dondorfer, Mark Johns, his wife Ginny, Virginia McIntyre, you have Shara Roman, Mercedes Simmons, and anybody else from the Ledge that I may have missed. We also have Jamie Romeo, Monroe County Clerk, and certainly, most importantly, our Gold Star families and our military service members and first responders. Welcome to everyone today. Today we gather to remember one of the darkest days in our nation's history. On September 11th, 2001, certainly 23 years ago, a day that is seared into every American's heart, the shock and devastation, the unimaginable loss that united us in grief, but also ignited a profound sense of resolve. On that day, we witnessed acts of evil for sure, but we certainly also saw incredible heroism. We remember the nearly 3,000 lives that were lost because we said we would never forget. But as we stand here, I think it's also really important to remember the events of 9/11 didn't just end with that day, and I think all of us here can appreciate that very much. Since then, countless brave men and women have stepped forward, answering the call to serve in our military, law enforcement, and fire service, roles that place them directly in harm's way. They've carried the weight of protecting our freedom, often a great personal sacrifice. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, counterterrorism missions around the globe, the daily protection of our communities all come at a heavy cost. At the Veterans Outreach Center, it's our mission to help individuals who bear these burdens. And one of the ways that I like to keep my staff motivated with this type of work is by creating special focus each year that'll kind of help us sharpen our skills a little bit, really promote that healthy internal culture, and ultimately allow us to do better for our vets. This year, our theme was Dig Deeper. As human service professionals, digging deeper means going beyond that surface level work and really getting to truly understand the underlying issues that the individuals we serve are experiencing. It's about recognizing that the people who come to us are not just the circumstances that they are currently experiencing. They're a lot more than that. They carry history and emotions and a whole web of factors that shape their current situation. And so digging deeper is about building those trusting relationships with our veterans. It's about personalizing solutions with them and staying curious and compassionate so that we can help them and really in going the extra mile. Today, as we honor the men and women who have served since 9/11 and we reflect on the events of that day, I would ask that we all dig deeper, that we not just remember what happened, but actually put that into action. Digging deeper in support of those that have continued to put their lives on the line, because it is easy to say, thank you for your service. And you hear a lot of people say that, but putting that into action is a whole nother animal. We need to really offer that meaningful support. And that might mean advocating for better resources so that our men and women who are coming back from combat or dealing with military sexual trauma have the services that they need. Could be ensuring that our law enforcement and fire officials have the tools that they need to protect our streets and our homes. Or it could be providing mental health services for all of our first responders that are facing trauma on a daily basis. Digging deeper means taking the time to listen. It's hearing those stories that come to us from the people that have served and continue to serve in our communities. So I wanted to share just very quickly a couple of little pieces with you of some things we're doing on the Digging Deeper front at VOC. And I don't usually get too far off track with what's happening at VOC on a day like today, but I think it's important to just, again, as we're looking at this concept of digging deeper in this wake of the 9/11 events, how are the people that we're serving, how are they needing these services? And so every month my staff send me an email, all 50 people, they send me an email on how they dug deeper for the month. That was not an easy task starting in January. People who are in service often do not like to brag about themselves or do anything that resembles that. But I kind of insisted on it, and so they did. And so every month I have the tremendous, I guess, pleasure of reading all the ways my team is helping to serve folks and helping to save lives. And so I thought I'd just read a couple of these emails real quick to you. One of the emails that I got said, on Thursday, June 20th, Intake received a phone call from a veteran whose family of 5 had completely run out of food, and this veteran was 10 days away from getting paid. The veteran was physically unable to get to VOC because he didn't have a license. It was late in the day, we were short-staffed, and so I, the person who sent me this email, delivered enough food for 2 weeks to his apartment. Second email said, this is the end of my first month at VOC. I've really enjoyed learning how I fit into our mission. The fitness center has allowed me to connect with our vets more than I expected. In this particular instance, a younger veteran came in with his dog. The staff member noticed that the dog was looking kind of thin, and she was not only concerned about the dog, but also the veteran's welfare. So she connected with another VOC staff member that runs Vets with Pets. And she went on to say, we looked him up in the system. My colleague called him to discover that he was in fact homeless again and living in his car. He didn't want to go to a shelter because he didn't want to give up his dog. And so she and the other staff member together helped that veteran get the dog licensed as an emotional support animal and then get into housing. The third dig deeper was a staff member who was able to help get a veteran a motorized scooter. He had been trying to get one for quite some time. He didn't have the money. And as somebody who was physically disabled, he was really struggling to get out of his house. And he said he just wished he could get outside the house, go to concerts and in the park and take a ride, do the things that he used to enjoy. So this staff member remembered that we have grants that can help with that type of thing. She went with him to Westside Medical Motors. They got the scooter, and the vet called a couple of times and told her how much he was enjoying getting out and about in the community. I could go on, and frankly, there are a lot of things that the staff have written to me about that are quite a bit deeper. They're darker. They are probably a lot more tied in directly to life-saving measures, but for privacy reasons, I thought I wouldn't share those aloud. What I did want to say is that we have to all dig deeper, and that is really what digging deeper is all about. as it relates to 9/11, because on that fateful day, our first responders embodied it by pushing beyond their limits and risking their lives to save others under unimaginable circumstances. Our military personnel exemplified digging deeper by swiftly responding to protect the nation and committing to defend freedom in unprecedented circumstances. And certainly every American has embodied digging deeper, but particularly on September 12th, when we all came together in unity and offered support to those who had faced tragedy and would face it in the days and years to come. And so as we move on in our program, I just want to say that for all that served and sacrificed on or since 9/11, and frankly before that too, but 9/11 is what we're here for today, they all deserve nothing less than for all of us to dig deeper on their behalf. So thank you. And now it is my honor to introduce our keynote. Nope, I've jumped ahead about 6 speakers in the program. At this point, I would like to introduce our first speaker. And I think that the way we'll do this actually is the first speaker will come up, and when they get done, they'll bring up the next speaker and so on until we get to the keynote, who I will then introduce. So if you all would please welcome a great friend to all veterans, Senator Jeremy Cooney.
What a beautiful day the Lord has made. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeremy Cooney, representing New York State Senate, District 56. I want to say a special welcome to all of our veterans who are here and our first responders, and of course, my partners in government. I thought I would use my brief time to just share a moment and a reflection from someone who was on the ground in the midst of the chaotic nature of 9/11. I had the opportunity to speak with a former staff member of Governor Pataki. And if you remember, Governor Pataki was actually in New York City when the first plane hit the tower. And I was reflecting on the solemnity of this day with this former staff member. And I asked him, I said, what was it like to be going through this very scary, uncertain moment, but also having to make sure that you had the bigger context at hand? How did you manage that? And he shared a story that I want to share with you. The governor was trying to reach the president. And if you remember, and you've seen the photos, right? The president was reading to a group of students, and they were trying to connect on the phone. And this staff member was working, and I'm sure as a former staff member, was sweating trying to get that phone call to be made. And when they were finally able to connect, Governor Pataki said to President Bush, Mr. President, we need you to shut down the airspace over Greater New York. And the president paused, and he said back to the governor, George, we've shut down the airspace across the United States of America. And that was the moment when we realized, when the staff person and the governor realized that this was bigger than New York. This is bigger than the United States. This was a moment in the world where everything stopped. And for me, as someone who remembers exactly where I was when this tragedy and this terrorist action was happening, it changed the world forever. And so we have these moments of pause and reflection. And I want to thank Laura and the team at VOC for allowing us to just take a pause in our busy lives and remember that the world forever changed. And it's what we do, the digging deeper, that will make a difference for the next generation. Thank you. And with that, I'll invite my colleague, Senator Samra Brook.
Thank you, Senator Cooney. Good morning, everyone. I want to start, I don't know where there she is, Laura, to just say thank you, Laura. You inspire me every time you talk, and I've heard you talk about digging deeper, and it's a good reminder for me as we're a little past halfway through the year to think about how we can dig deeper. And for anyone who is maybe not aware of just the work that the Veteran Outreach Center does every single day, not only for veterans and our community members, but also for those of us in government, so that we know where to send folks who are coming to us for help. And we always know that door is open. And your leadership is a big reason why we feel so safe sending people there. So thank you so much. A lot of people talk about where we were the day of September 11th. And I think about where I was. I remember what I was doing. I was actually in English class. I even remember, and I don't know if others do too, I even remember the smells of that place. And I remember thinking, I was relatively young. I might be one of the last in this generation to remember what happened on September 11th. Of course, for my daughter, I'll have to educate her about what happened, right? But I remember that the teachers, the administrators had that moment of, do we tell the kids what happened? Do we allow them to understand the gravity of what's happening? Or do we just go back to our reading and hope that this isn't what we think it is? And I remember feeling that angst in those moments of, being a teenager who probably acted more like a 20-something, thinking, I can take it. I want to understand what's going on. I'm going to go look at the news. I want to understand this. And I remember that afternoon, I was a volunteer at the Pittsford ambulance, and the people who I had kind of thought of as my aunts and uncles, who were the, EMTs and the paramedics, telling me, we're leaving. We're going down to New York City. It's all hands on deck. We're all going. And I remember thinking, as a 16, 17-year-old, what could I do, right? Well, I can stay here and take care of things while these people who I've grown to care so much for go and do what needs to get done. And I think that that's very representative of many folks in our communities, right? We've talked about our first responders running into danger while everyone else was trying to run out. Our service members stepping up, perhaps folks who never thought they'd become a service member, but being motivated and driven that they needed to do something. And then there were the people like me and the people like many others in our communities who stepped up in smaller ways because they knew that this is not the time that you sit at home. This is not the time that you just watch it on the news. You want to ask yourself 10 years from then, what did you do? How did you reach out to a neighbor? And that's what I think is so incredible about the way we responded as Americans and as citizens in a moment like that. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that so many service members gave the ultimate sacrifice. And we will never be able to show enough gratitude to them and to their families. And there are so many service members who are back in our communities, as Laura talked about, who are still facing the challenges that they've been left with from their service. And so in my position, as I sit here, not only as the senator for this beautiful community, as the chair of our mental health committee, as a member of the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee in the Senate, I look at what I can do every day, right? What can each of us do every day to better support? And so that's why I'm very grateful to VOC, and I see Nick Stefanovic here, and we've done so much work here in the county of reaching our veterans where they are, offering services that they need, and doing it in a way that is accessible and approachable to make sure they understand we know we're not doing enough, and we know that there's more to do to support you. Finally, I want to say a thank you to all of our service members for your service. Thank you to all of the families who have sacrificed so much for that service. There are no words with which we can properly thank the brave individuals who gave the ultimate sacrifice. Your courage, your legacies, your devotion to this nation will never be forgotten. Thank you. With that, I will bring up my colleague in the Assembly, Assemblymember Josh Jensen in District 134.
Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate it. I'm so honored to be here today with VOC and especially with our Gold Star families. Summer talked about, she remembers where she was in English class, and I'll do her one better. I was in Miss Pecora's art class in 8th grade at Merton Williams Middle School in the Hilton School District. And looking back, every year, I'm reflected by the fact, a 12-year-old, you understand what's happening. My father's a firefighter. I understood what it meant. I heard it from him. But I think somebody at my age then, and younger generations, don't comprehend that on September 11th, 2001, the course of human history changed forever. And it wasn't just because our nation was attacked, but it's because the course of human history was changed because it affected the lives of so many people. It's so fitting that we're standing in front of the War on Terror Memorial because America's sons and daughters volunteered to fight an enemy that we didn't know, to lay their lives down for a nation, to ensure that no other foreign threat, whether state or terrorist group, could ever come to our nation and attack us at home. Being the son of a firefighter who knew FDNY members who died at Ground Zero, I'm touched by the 343 members of FDNY who died that day, the 72 law enforcement personnel who died that day when they ran in to a burning tower that they knew was likely to fall down. But that was their job, just like it's the job of our men and women in the armed services to run towards the gunfire, to run towards the enemy. But what's telling to me is it's not the 343 who died from the FDNY. It's the 363 in the 23 years since they've died from Ground Zero related cancers. The tens of thousands of individuals who are living, afflicted, and suffering from Ground Zero related illnesses, because it was their duty to go into the rubble to find their brothers and bring them home. And because of their service, they're suffering today. Because of their service and sacrifice, our Gold Star families are suffering today. But the Lord says, joy cometh in the morning. And for that, we can rejoice and be glad. That sacrifice is what makes America, America. And what ensures that my generation and my kids' generation remember that our liberty and our freedom is paid for by the blood and sacrifice of those willing to give of themselves to something larger than themselves. So may God bless their memory, may God bless their families, and may he continue to shed his magnificent grace on the United States of America. And with that, I'll bring up my colleague from the Assembly, Assemblywoman Sarah Clark.
Thank you. I know it's a long list of elected officials all here to tell our story, but I did part of it is, it's our coping mechanism. It is a day that affected us all in different ways because we were all different ages when it happened. I will be up here as now the oldest of the state delegation to speak about, it's interesting because I do think you could go around to each one of you here and hear about your story of where you were and what was happening, and they will all resonate with us in a certain way because it was such a shocking day. I was just hired in the U.S. Senate. I was working in the federal building. I was there early. We didn't have the internet the way we do now. So, someone came running into my office and said, turn on the TV. We did. And as it unfolded within an hour, the federal building was evacuated because no one knew who was a target. No one knew what was next. And I think a lot about that. And the responsibility of our generation, for me, always reflects back to Pearl Harbor. What did our grandparents want to teach our parents? What did they want to make sure was always remembered? Pearl Harbor and World War II, we lost so many people in that conflict and in that war for freedom. But at home, everyone sacrificed as well. They went without food. They went without the necessities that we think of today that everyone wants or needs. And they did it because it was a greater good. And now it is our duty as this generation. I think of my 3 teenage kids who were born after 9/11, but born soon enough after that it was still raw and it was still something we were all contemplating and really trying to figure out what to do. So what are we telling them to always remember? Why do we gather here every year to remember? And what is that next legacy? And for me, you know, we call it that day of fear and darkness, that day of, you know, out of nowhere on a beautiful blue skied morning. Is that the next day, all the calls I got weren't full of fear and worry. And we got slammed the next day. The next few weeks, we were getting slammed with phone calls in the office. And it was always, what can I do? How can I help? And that was just the motto day in and day out as we moved along after 9/11. It's the memories we've all heard of the first responders, right? The line of ambulances pouring into New York City, the number of people who ran into a burning building when others were trying so desperately to escape. But it was also the thousands and thousands of civilians who signed up for military service, the kindness to strangers, the feeling of a united America, that you could look different, believe different, but feel commonality, something that today we often feel is really lost. And I think the greatest gift we can give our children. 23 years now of reflecting, of showing up year in, year out. I remember the first time I saw someone getting married on 9/11, or a soccer game scheduled, or a school meeting or work meeting, and you're like, whoa, how can that be? This is 9/11. But life does move on. So now it's our duty to ensure we don't forget that the memories of evil that happened on 9/11 and subsequently the war on terror that took place, we were constantly surrounded by healing powers of kindness, faith, and resolve. And the lasting legacy, what we continue to gather here for, is that, particularly here in the Gary Bykirk Park, that service to others in whatever form it may be. It requires sacrifice. It comes at a price. But at its core is what defines us as Americans and what brings us the most hope. It's what brings us together. And I feel honored every day to get to be here with all of you, to get to be in these ceremonies across our community so that we can honor that, we can carry that on, that my teenagers will pick up on it and feel it and carry it on as they move forward in life. Thank you. And with that, I will introduce our wonderful county executive who has really committed himself to our veterans here, County Executive Adam Bello.
Good morning. Thank you, Assemblymember Clark. It's wonderful to be here with all of you here today. It's really my honor and privilege to be with so many members of the armed services and our veterans community. And of course, our Gold Star and Blue Star families. I want to thank Laura. Laura, where'd you go? Thank you. I cannot thank you enough for your partnership when it comes to serving our veterans in this community. The relationship between our Veterans Service Agency, Nick Stevanovic, who is here, and the Veterans Outreach Center could not be stronger. Our relationship is wonderful. And I want to thank you for all the work that you and your team do today. I will try to be brief, as always. I'll try to be brief today. But I think it's important that we all be here to honor the lives of the victims, the heroes, and the survivors of those terrible attacks. We're here today to give reverence to our first responders, our firefighters, our law enforcement officials who ran straight towards that danger. Their only motivation was to help others, to save lives, in some cases, and in too many cases, cost their own. I want to express gratitude also to those crews and the first responders who in the days and weeks that followed exposed themselves to all those harmful toxins and future health concerns as they searched through the debris and try to return our communities to a sense of normalcy. I also want to thank our veterans and those members of our community who moved into that swell of patriotism in the face of the terrorist attacks and enlisted in our armed forces to serve and protect us all, and acknowledge the rippling impacts that this horrible tragedy continues to have on our lives today. Our brave service members who fought in the global war on terror, some returned home with the horrors of war carried back with them, and others made the ultimate sacrifice, their names forever enshrined on this beautiful monument behind me. We recognize and honor our Gold Star families who are with us here today, as well as those in our community, and we express our gratitude for the sacrifice made by their loved ones. Our Gold Star families have made a sacrifice that most of us can't even begin to imagine. They're the parents who face the loss of a child, spouses who carry an emptiness that cannot be filled, and children whose sorrow defies comprehension. Their burdens are ones that no one should ever have to bear alone. As a community, we must lend our strength to these families who have given so much for our country. And it's up to us to live our lives in a way that honors their sacrifices. So to all of our Gold Star families, know that our community grieves with you, and know that we will keep our sacred obligation to you in the memory of your loved ones. Without a doubt, the events of September 11th were a defining moment. Our speakers have talked about all where we were, our exact locations. I myself was in the Capitol 23 years ago this morning. And like all of you here, I remember I can be transported there in a moment. I can see it, I can feel it, I can smell it, I can be there. Today, 23 years later, though, it strikes me that an entire generation, if you think about the population, it's about 30% of the U.S. population was born after the attacks. So this is a generation that doesn't share that memory that we're all sharing today, and they don't have that visceral recall of what it felt like. You know, and I know for me, every time I think of today, I am drawn back, like I said, it's that chaos, the panic that I felt that day, the fear. But what also really strikes me, and what I talked to my children about this morning, is that it reminds me of the days and weeks that followed when we came together as America. We came together as Americans. And that feeling, I think, sometimes is absent, especially for our most recent generation. So it's our duty to ensure that one of the lasting legacies of the 9/11 terrorist attacks is that America is strong. Americans are strong. We're caring, we're patriotic, and we are resilient. As much as I remember the chaos, I remember the kindness. And Laura, your theme today of Dig Deep, that really spoke to me in a way here, because I looked some of this stuff up, because that's really what I remembered was Americans digging deep, right? The Red Cross in the wake of 9/11 received $1.1 billion in relief donations, right? We had over 59,000 families that were helped by the Red Cross. Hundreds of thousands of individuals lined up to give blood. If you remember the blood donation lines wrapping around blocks in communities all over this country. In the year after 9/11, more people enlisted in the military than in any year since. The full first recruitment after the attack, over 180,000 Americans joining the ranks of active duty service. Over 72,000 enlisted in the reserves. And if you remember this, one of the most stark things was the flags that were flying from every house in the community, the large flags that were flying everywhere. That was patriotic. We were united. We were one. We were Americans. The lasting legacy of 9/11 is that from darkness of that day, Americans shone light. All Americans, no matter your race, your creed, what's in your bank account, your zip code, where you live, your politics, it didn't matter. We were beacons of hope, and we were united. And it's those acts of greatness that our first responders, our firefighters, our law enforcement, our members of the military, without regard to their own personal consequences and how it might affect them, they put their very lives on the line because it was the right thing to do, and it was the American thing to do. And so our light also shows in small acts, embracing our neighbors who are in pain, lending a phone, sharing a meal, offering our thanks to give to those who give for the greater good. So it's a moment in time. 9/11 was a moment in time, but not so distant from where we are today, right? It's a feeling we should still strive to get back to, that the after effect, the patriotism, the united spirit that we all felt, a love of neighbors and a love for country. Now we are entrusted with that legacy now to preserve the heart of democracy, the ideals of equity and freedom that we have here at home. We have a responsibility to leave this world even just a little bit better than we found it. And so when I talk to my kids today who are part of that 30% that don't have that memory, I talk to them every year. They know where I was. They know what this day is about. But what I talk to them about is what I saw after 9/11, what I saw on September 12th, what I saw on September 13th, what I saw on September 14th, and what their role in the world is, and how the legacy of those who sacrifice and continue to sacrifice after that day, their legacy is now enshrined with them. And what can they do today to make this community a better place? So this is the time to make that lasting memorial to all of those who we lost on 9/11. And that should be the lasting sacrifice that is the lasting tribute that we make to those who sacrificed on 9/11. So God bless those who we lost on September 11th, our first responders, the men and women of the armed forces, and may God continue to grace us with the strength and resolve to live as one united America. Thank you. God bless you. And now it is my pleasure to invite up to the podium the Deputy Mayor of the City of Rochester, Michael Burns.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I want to thank Laura and the team at Veterans Outreach for gathering us here today to pay our respects to those who lost their lives in the attacks of 9/11 and to share our gratitude for the veterans and first responders who answered the call that day and in the days that followed. I'm honored and humbled to be here today on behalf of the mayor and alongside our partners in government. To all the veterans and first responders who are here with us today, I want to sincerely thank you for your service. To all the families, friends, and loved ones of those who protect us and rush in where help is needed, our first responders, and those who were lost protecting us, thank you for your sacrifices and your strength. Answering the call to service and valuing the service and sacrifice of our veterans and those who rush in where help is needed is something that was instilled in me at an early age. My father served in the Air Force and is a proud Vietnam veteran who is fortunate to live in a community that values his service and supports him as he continues to overcome the emotional and physical challenges that remain some 50 years after his service was completed. So my sincere thanks to the Veterans Outreach Center, Monroe County Veteran Services Agency, and our Sheriff's Department for all that you do to support and honor our veterans and their sacrifices. That need never goes away. In addition to service, unity is perhaps the most inspiring takeaway from the tragedy of 9/11. In the immediate aftermath of the attacks, people of all backgrounds, beliefs, and walks of life came together to support one another as Americans. In a time of unfathomable loss, people opened their hearts, helped those around them without question, and stepped up to serve in whatever way their service was needed. I remember that day just trying to take stock of what had just happened and wondering how and if we could ever recover. I remember distinctly being in East Syracuse, New York at a client engagement and just pulling into the parking lot and hearing the breaking news on the radio and wondering what the heck had happened. And then trying to get through to loved ones and phone service was not functional. What would happen next? But we found a way together, united as Americans. We recovered, we rebuilt, and today, as we're all gathered here, we remember. As we remember those we lost on 9/11, let us honor their memory by continuing to foster the unity that we felt on that day and in the days that followed. Let us keep faith in what we can accomplish together. Let us look out for our neighbor and cherish our community. Let us serve in whatever way we are called to do so, remembering the past and working together to create a brighter and better future. May we never forget, and may we always stand together, united as Americans. Thank you. And I'd now like to call up our Monroe County Sheriff, Todd Baxter.
What a beautiful day to remember. And I'm just going to share a story of a servant, a recent story though, not a 9/11 story, because this kid was only 5 years old when the towers fell and our headquarters of our greatest military in the world was attacked, and Flight 93 over the Pennsylvania skies with Let's Roll.
was brought down by heroes. Talking about Jonathan Ritter. Jonathan Ritter's dad worked for me in the Greece Police Department as a police officer. And as a young man, he's seen what service was by his dad's actions and the actions we've already discussed today on a response to 9/11. He decided to join the United States military via ROTC at Syracuse, where he ran across a young man who's serving now, my son, Zach, and they became friends. Jonathan, via the National Guard, deployed twice overseas, served our country, gave a lot. Fortunately, didn't have to give it all at that moment. But on the streets of Cleveland this year, he gave it all, and his family gave it all. And that just paints the picture of who these great Americans are, who these servants are. Decades later, if you will, and these guys and gals are still stepping up to serve, whether it's streets of a city or a local police department, a fire department, a volunteer ambulance crew. That's service. They're willing to give it all. And we just got to recognize that it hasn't gone away. It hasn't gone away. There's young people out there stepping up all the time to serve in sometimes a very difficult environment. So if we can remember today, all our Gold Star families and these precious names, but if we can also remember Jonathan and people like him that are still stepping up to this day to keep us a great free country with our liberties. And I'm going to cut it off right there. That's enough said. I get to introduce Nick Stevanovic. Nick is a humble guy, so he isn't going to like to say it, but Senator, great nomination for Veterans Hall of Fame and well-deserving, Nick. And I think that's all we got to say. You're always serving us, brother. God bless you.
Good morning. I just want to say two things. In the days leading up to 9/11, I usually have some type of theme or thought that I'm thinking about, and it's usually different every year. And this year, I've had that theme and thought, and then this morning things changed a little bit, and I just want to say a few words about something that I heard this morning, and I'm going to be brief about it, and then I don't think it deserves another thought. But there is a conversation that's happened out in our community over the past year, and longer than that. And that conversation is about how we define our country and what it does foreign policy wise, our engagement in wars, and where we stand ethically and morally when it comes to our history. And that's a great conversation to have. And it can be debatable, and there's good ideas, there's bad ideas. I believe that the best way to address bad ideas is with information and education, and that's how you defeat them. But there's a sentiment out there that we're the aggressors, we're the bad ones, we're the immoral ones. And for the most part, that sentiment is very rare. And I think it comes from ignorance and lack of information. But I just want to make one point that I think it's important to recognize when you're thinking about the role that America plays in the definition of good and evil. I don't think it could be more accurate to define evil as someone who purposefully targets and kills or causes suffering to innocent people. And there is a big difference between purposefully attacking innocent people and the collateral damage that happens in war. And I, having served in the military, can say with as much confidence as I possibly can that purposefully targeting and killing innocent men, women, and children has never been a part of any U.S. military mission planning in our history of this country. And that's all I'm going to say about that. The thought that I've been having this year when it comes to 9/11 is resilience, and how different the definition of resilience is in the business of the military, law enforcement, EMS, and fire. We don't have the opportunity to not be resilient in that business, right? I was thinking the other day, I had a friend, one of my deployments in Afghanistan, I had a friend who at one point was shot in the leg, and it didn't end up being a big deal. It was a flesh wound. And we laughed about it. When I came in the tent, I had heard that he had been shot. We were in a convoy, and he was in a truck that broke down, and he had to get from that truck to another truck. And he ended up getting hit in the leg when he was running in between trucks. And I walked in, and he looked up at me, And he said, "They got me, Nick. They got me." And I started laughing, and he laughed. And I said, "So what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm going to take a shower, and then I'll be back out on patrol tomorrow." And I can remember another time, one of the worst incidents that we had in Afghanistan. I can remember a time where our gunny sat us down in this room, and he looked at us, and he was looking at a group of kids that had just experienced the worst thing that they had ever experienced in their life, that they probably couldn't have imagined they would experience. And he said, here's your orders. Here's what I'm going to say to you, and then that's going to be it. I don't want to hear anybody talking about it. I don't want to see anybody crying about it. You're going to be back out tomorrow, and when you get out, go to the VA and take care of it. But you have no other option. A lot of people might think, oh, that's terrible. That's the necessity of being in the business. I imagine that theoretically, if I were shot in my office tomorrow and I went to my boss, Adam Bello, and said, "Adam, I got shot," I imagine he wouldn't say, "Yeah, Nick, all right, I feel really bad about that, but tomorrow, 8:30, I'd like you back in the building." And, but that's the gift that these services provide to our country, is that our country doesn't have to live that way because we did. I'm going to wrap up by saying I just came from the Irondequoit event. I've been having some very challenging, meaningful conversations over the past week with a good friend of mine who's the Irondequoit town supervisor. Probably most people know here, Irondequoit went through something terrible recently. And I'm blown away, even to this day, by the resilience of law enforcement. My brother's in law enforcement, but it's the same type of resilience that we had to exhibit in Afghanistan. These men and women walked into a home and saw something unbelievably horrific. And they did not have the option of saying, "I need a break. I'm going to take a break and I'm going to go work on this." Their only option was to get back up the next morning, take a shower, get in the office, and go look for the guys that did this, because they need to protect the community. And I think that's something worth acknowledging and worth respecting about the men and women who serve our community. Thank you to Laura, the Veterans Outreach Center, for always making sure that we remember this day and making sure this is a great event. Thank you to Amy Falwell, the chair of the War on Terror Memorial, that stands behind me, is one of the most important pieces of infrastructure to many of us in this community. And as I'm mentioning that, I'd like to thank Senator Robach, the county executive, Adam Bello, for all the work that they helped helped to build this and make sure that it stood here. And thank you to everyone here. I think everybody was, my friend Sean Fico's back there. Dave Lippa is in the background. Dave was acknowledged at the Monroe County Legislature last night. Dave isn't a veteran, and he's never been in law enforcement, but he's one of the most important people in our population, because he's somebody who picks up the phone every single time someone calls. And he brought that up last night. And I guess that would be my last thought. There is something that every single person sitting here can do if you think these people are worthy of our respect. And that is to pick up the phone, no matter how high of an office you stand in, to pick up the phone when you see an individual suffering. And with that said, I think I will bring back up Laura Heltz, Director of VOC.
I'd like to thank all of our elected officials and all the folks that shared some of their words with us today. And before I bring up our guest speaker, who I'm very excited to introduce you all to, I just want to say to Charlie and Ray, Tom, sorry. You guys are amazing. I mean, this is classic military service right here. You know, the flags were kind of falling on me, I think, maybe when I was speaking originally, and they just came up, and they've been standing here this whole time. And so I just want to say thank you, guys. Appreciate that. Okay, so it's my honor now to introduce our keynote speaker. Fishers Fire Chief Steve Chitterer has been in fire service for 23 years. He also serves as the volunteer fire chief for the town of Mendon, and he currently serves with the New York Army National Guard. Over the last 22 years in military service, Steve has been on multiple humanitarian aid missions, as well as 3 combat deployments as a medic and a flight paramedic. And I want to quickly say too, Steve's parents are here today, so welcome to our ceremony. We are very honored to have somebody speak to us today who represents both, of course, fire service and military service on this very, very special day. So Steve, would you join us up here, please? Thank you.
Veterans, I'm sorry, in typical First Sergeant fashion, I'm going to piggyback off of everything else that's already been said, all right? First off, thank you, Laura and VOC, for having our ceremony today. Gold Star families, your sacrifice could never be redeemed. Thank you for being here and sharing this day with us. To our elected officials, including fellow veteran Todd Baxter, thank you for joining us. Today, we gather not just to remember, but to reflect on an event that changed the course of history a short 23 years ago. September 11th, 2001 is etched in our collective memory. A day the world stood still. The values that we hold dear were put to the ultimate test. We remember where we were, the shock that we felt, and the overwhelming sense of loss that followed. For me, I was actually a senior down the road at Honey Falls Lima High School, sitting in CAD class, like everyone else. I can remember exactly what computer I was at if I walked into the classroom, if it exists still today. Apparently, there's been a couple decades since I graduated. I don't know. But we also remember the unity, the bravery, the patriotism, and the resilience that emerged from the rubble. Remember the heroes, ordinary people who in the face of unimaginable terror became extraordinary. For me, the events of 9/11, changing the guard.
Sorry, sir.
You're good. Can you change?
All set.
All right, bud.
Yep.
For me, the events of 9/11 have been a defining force in my life. I've had the honor of serving the New York Army National Guard for over 20 years. As said, I've done 3 combat deployments and about 22 humanitarian missions. I've also dedicated over 20 years of my life to the fire service, standing alongside brothers and sisters in arms and in the fire service, and who all understand the true meaning of sacrifice. This path that I've led and have walked has deeply been shaped by the legacy of 9/11 and the events of that day. And I'm proud to continue with my service to my country and to my community. Sorry, Mother Nature gets a vote. September 11th was more than just a day of tragedy. It was a turning point and a moment where everything has changed. As the country music artist Alan Jackson asked, where were you when the world stopped turning? I'm sure many of us remember those songs and the patriotism that came out those days afterwards. For many of us, those days were solidified in our resolve to serve, to protect, and to ensure that such an atrocity would never happen to us again. I remember the surge of patriotism. The U.S. flags adorned hundreds of homes, pickup trucks with 3x5 tail hitch, duct tapes, and zip ties. Nobody cared. They did it because we were all together, and we were all supporting our first responders, our military men and women, and our determination to stand against those who sought to break our spirit. On 9/12, there were no political parties. There was only Americans. Personally, 9/11 solidified my commitment to serve. It was a call to action, a reminder that the freedoms we cherish come at a cost. And it's up to us to safeguard them. The images of firefighters running into the towers, soldiers heading off to the war, and communities coming together in support of the aftermath. These are the images that have stayed with me and continue to motivate my service. As we talked about, in my 21 years in the New York Army National Guard, I've had the privilege of serving alongside some of the bravest men and women this country has to offer. During my deployments, I've noticed the firsthand unity and resiliency of our military. We face challenges that test our limits, from being in Baghdad and assisting with the first democratic elections, to being selected as a pilot program member of the first combat paramedic program, to then serving my brothers and sisters directly as a critical care flight paramedic in Afghanistan twice. These challenges made us think, feel, and work together, and that we always rose to the occasion, driven by a shared sense of duty and commitment. 9/11 was a catalyst for a new era in the military service. The mission changed from force projection to direct action, and with it, our understanding of what it means to serve. It was no longer about defending our borders. It was about taking the fight to those who had threatened our way of life as Americans. My experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan brought home the reality of this new mission, but they also underscored the unbreakable bonds of brotherhood that from when you stood shoulder to shoulder in the face of danger. Similar to the military, the American Fire Service is built on a foundation of trust, camaraderie, and unwavering commitment to protect others. Values that were brought into a sharp focus on 9/11. As firefighters, we understand the risks that we take every time we answer a call. But 9/11 was a stark reminder of just how high those risks could be. The 343 brave firefighters who lost their lives that day did so mostly with the knowledge that they were going to harm's way to save others and embodying the very essence of what it means to be a firefighter, knowing full well they might not be coming out of the building. In the years since their supreme sacrifice has served as a powerful reminder to us all in the fire service of the stakes involved in our work. It's a legacy that inspires and helps us uphold the standards of courage, selfless service that we are so vividly displayed that day. The brotherhood that we have shared is not just a bond, it's a commitment to try and live up to the example set by those men and women on that fateful day. As we honor the memory of 9/11 and the sacrifices made since, we must acknowledge a truth for those of us that have served. Service and sacrifice carry a weight that is deeply personal. Whether it's in the military or first responders, we've stood on the front lines, felt the fear, and faced the dangers. We understand the true cost of the oaths that we have taken. We have been there when our friends have been wounded or perished, and we have stood in more funeral formations than we care to remember. However, many of our elected officials who have never walked in our shoes may never fully grasp this reality. Leadership from a distance can sometimes create a disconnect, a gap in understanding the profound commitment and courage required of those who serve. It is not enough to lead with authority or title. True leadership demands empathy, the willingness to listen, to learn, and to make a sincere effort to understand the experiences and requirements of those who defend our nation and protect our communities. Leaders who refuse to learn are doomed to repeat the failures of their predecessors and result in further leadership failures. The best decisions are made when leaders seek out the voices of those who have been there, who have faced the worst, and who continue to stand ready to serve. As we move forward, it is crucial that our leaders commit to policies that generally support and uplift those who have sacrificed so much. By doing so, they not just honor the memory of the 9/11 victims, but the ongoing spirit of service to those who continue to serve today. As we reflect on the physical sacrifices of so many of 9/11, physical sacrifices made by so many on 9/11 and in the years that follow, we also acknowledge an invisible wound. The toll of that day and the years of service and combat that have followed have left many of us with scars that are not always visible. The scars that impact our mental health, our well-being, and our ability to carry on. For those of us in the military and the fire service, the experiences we faced can lead to challenges that are often difficult to talk about, whether it's PTSD, depression, anxiety, or the lingering effects of trauma. These are real struggles, and they are real battles that many of us fight every day. As we have felt the effects locally and in the past, here and recently, with some service members and local civil servants choosing to end their own lives. Personally, when I lost 3 friends in a helicopter crash a couple years ago, I had never felt this type of loss before in my life. To make it worse, I had no self-realization that I was having a problem. I was good. I was moving on. I was fine. I didn't go get help because I didn't need it. But we need to break that stigma. It's crucial that we break the stigma surrounding mental health. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. It's an acknowledgement that just as we take care of our bodies, we must also take care of our minds. To many of our brothers and sisters who have suffered in silence, it's time we change the narrative. After that crash, as a leader, I had enrolled myself in therapy just to set the example, because that's what I do. As a leader, I'm supposed to lead by example. At the first couple of appointments, I was going through the motions, checking the blocks. All of a sudden, appointment after appointment after appointment, I started having the self-realization that maybe I wasn't as good as I was. I started having that full circle, full embodiment of what truly was going on in my own head. As I felt better, I felt happier. I was willing to interact and talk more and more with families and friends and emotions. about the events that transpired that day, that evening. We owe it to ourselves, fellow veterans, and we owe it to our families, more importantly, and to those that we've lost in memory, to ensure that we are taking care of our own and our own well-being. To that, there are many resources available, whether it is counseling like I have participated in, peer support groups, or other service organizations that are dedicated to help veterans and first responders. Reaching out is the first step towards healing and is something each of us should feel empowered to do. No one should have to face these challenges alone. Let us also commit to each other that we will look out for each other each and every day. We are a family, and just as we would never leave a comrade on the battlefield or a firefighter at the scene of a fire, we must ensure that no one is left behind when it comes to mental health. The Veterans Outreach Center here in Rochester has actually just opened the Steve Preston Peer Connection Center for veterans to be able to sit down and just sit with other veterans, to sit in the room and just be in the spirit and the presence of brothers and sisters in arms. The VOC also offers many programs to help, like suicide prevention, a buddy check system, also has a water massage therapy chair that I was introduced to. It's pretty cool. They also have a barber and beauty shop. So if anyone is struggling to get in, they have appointments there too. If you're struggling, please know that there are people who care, who understand, who want to, and who are ready to help. As we stand here today, it is our duty to remember not just the events of 9/11, but of the lives lost, the sacrifices made, and the heroes who emerged. We remember the civilians, the first responders, the soldiers, the sailors, the airmen, the Marine, who have all given their all in the years that followed. Their legacy is one of courage, resilience, and an unyielding commitment to the values that define our nation. Remembering is not just to look back at it, it's about carrying their spirit forward. It's about ensuring that their sacrifices were not in vain, and we continue to uphold the principles that they fought and many died for. And remembering, we're called to serve our communities, our nation, and more importantly, to each other. The legacy of 9/11 is a call to action, a reminder that the freedoms we enjoy must be defended, and that the safety of our communities relies on the selfless service of those willing to step up and serve in times of need. Whether you're a member of the military, a first responder, or a civilian, we all have a role to play in this ongoing story. The continuance to serve with the same dedication, bravery, patriotism, and commitment that was so vividly displayed on that fateful day 23 years ago. And in closing, today, we honor the men and women and the heroes who have fallen in 9/11, the first responders, the passengers and crew of Flight 93, and many of those who have passed since 9/11 from the illnesses contracted during their service, like my friend, former NYPD officer and former Fishers Fire Chief Andy Stromfeld, the military members who have fought and died in the years of service, and all of those who have served and who continue to serve. Their sacrifice is a testament to the enduring spirit of America, a spirit that refuses to be broken. We owe them our deepest gratitude, and we honor them by carrying forward the legacy of service and sacrifice that they have left behind. May we never forget their bravery. May we always strive to live up to the example they set. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Chitter, First Sergeant Chitter. We really appreciate your words very much. Actually, before you all sit back down, if you could stand back up, please. We are going to retire the colors. So if I could have the honor guard return up to the podium.
Ready? Halt. Left face.
Prepare to retrieve. Present. Hard. Ready. Two. Retrieve. Return to ranks. Right. Face. Forward. Hard.
With that, this concludes our ceremony. I just want to thank the county for hosting us in this beautiful location and thank my staff for putting it all together and hope you all have a wonderful and blessed day. Thank you.